good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Disembodied Hands Quindy, Justin, John, and hey you, Kiki, how about Kiki? No, too distracted by blanket. Wants to wrestle with blanket, does not want, here, come here, seat, do up, good girl, yay! I see we lost Shadow Raven to a horse, so here's my horse. Here's my horse. She's not quite as big as a horse. She's close, though. She's close. Right, silly girl? Yeah. Oh, good girl. Yeah, I just want them to see your ears. Your ears fell off. They fell off. Where'd they go? Where'd they go, Kiki? There they are. There they are. Good girl. Good girl. Long snout. Hi, long snout. You good girl. All right. Okay, let's go. Good girl. Yeah, good girl. You are a good girl. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to open your door. I'll be right back, guys. Hold on. I'm going to open your door just a little bit, okay? Now you have more air. Okay, good. No, you got to sit. You got to hang out. No. Nope. Hi. Yes, I have to stream. Silly dog. I know you want to play with your blanket, but you cannot do so. Maybe later. Oh, how are y'all? She's a mini horse, yeah. Yeah, we saw, when we were at the art show this weekend, we saw David's friend David. And David's friend David hasn't seen Kiki since she was like 35 pounds. And he's like, what is she now, 45 pounds? We just about died. We're like, try 70, 75. And he's like, I'm like, did you not get that this was a large breed? Oh, dear. But yes, I saw we did lose Shadow Raven to a horse, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm all right with that. Horses are beautiful things, and they need trottings and ridings, so why not? It's rainy here today. On and off, which is weird because normally it dries out and gets all like, sunny and dry and arid. But we're in the middle of a small dash of rain for some reason for the next couple days. Oh, what the heck was I doing here? Right, yeah, that. I was grabbing my Akata Blue. And I can't remember what else I was using, to be honest. I'm just going to grab something random. I'm feeling random today. Very random. Very random. No, I wasn't using Templar. Though I could use Templar. Templar's legal. I'm just trying to remember what I used for the shading, but I think I just used a liner because I'm looking at it and it looks a lot like a brown liner. Tiny bit. Has that look to it, which gives it that more neutral gray because the brown liner is a complementary color to the blue because brown is orange. Oh no, Kriniko. I'm sorry, she has an upset tum. Sorry. It happens. Mama-san's Sun Panther was very vomity as well. He just was. He'd just eat fast and then he'd like puke. Although the hairball food helped him a lot, but not when he'd ingest something that irritated his tract. All right, so we're going to just go with brown liner. I think that's what I use. So I'm going to mix up my Akata Blue, which is a beautiful Pathfinder color. And I'm going to mix up a version of it with a tiny bit of brown liner in it. Tiny bit of brown liner. But Akata was our base coat for this, and it looks actually a lot more... here, let's get some white in the picture. Now you can see more what the actual color of the piece is. So that Akata Blue really wasn't very dark, and so we're adding in some slightly darker shadows to get more contrast. It tends to bleach out just a little bit. When you're working, if you're ever doing this and taking photos or you're streaming or videoing, anything, any background other than white is going to make a white cape just bleach out. So you won't be able to see the subtlety in it like you can when you add white to the scene. So that's why I added my palette, so you guys can see the way it acts. This is the way it actually looks. You can see that we do have room to bring up our pure white on this cape. We're bringing it up there. And I'll be essentially bringing that further up the folds today, and also darkening the shadows just a little bit. I feel like we do need a little bit more shadow in there. Yep, that was last time. Last time, Agent Marvel. Alrighty, and we'll get our white. But yeah, it's just kind of a day today. Yesterday I was kind of running a bit on fumes myself because I did not sleep well. So today I did sleep well, but I still feel like I'm waking up. So there we are. Ugh. Yeah, as long as she's acting like herself, except for the vomiting, I think you're pretty good at Caerindra. I always put that. That's the first question, right? Alrighty. I'm doing a 4 to 2 on all of these, though it's a 5 to 2 in the case of the shadow that I added an extra drop of brown liner to. I'm going to mix up that shadow color, which gives us that gray, and I might want to add another drop of liner. I'm going to see how this works. My colors look like that right now, but as you can see, we got a very, just kind of like lighter gray, which is what we're seeing here. So this is almost certainly the color I was using. So I have to kind of look at that and go, well, is that really dark enough? And I don't know that it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix another blob up here that's actually darker by transferring some of this north, so to speak. Oh yes, they always believe you're the worst cat or dog mom ever when you're doing things for them. It's just like kids. Just like kids. There we go. So that's a darker gray. Now this is as dark as I would probably go. Any darker than this will look really artificial, and I'll only be able to put this darker gray into the deepest shadows. Now, if you're doing like a really dramatic lighting effect, as always, any rule, quote unquote, I give you on this show is able to be broken. If you're doing a piece that obviously has very strong sunlight, then your whites can have quite dark shadows, but you still need to make sure that the majority of the surface that you want to read as white does so. Okay, let's see here. You can see as I move less white out of the frame, move more white out of the frame, that everything starts to lighten a little bit. So I want to leave it in. And I am going to want to put some actual lining around this cape as well. So let's just get a little bit of brown liner and just mix that up, and then we'll have everything. And we'll have all our colors mixed up. Now, I could have used a darker gray blue for my shadows here. It would have resulted in something that didn't look as natural. Nonetheless, that's what we usually reach for in miniature painting, right? That's the way we're taught to do it. That's what the Reaper triads do. But again, it's not absolutely necessary. I'll just do a 4 to 1 for my liner because I don't want it to be too transparent. Yeah. I mean, you can, right? You could do it just tends to look like comic book style if you go black-white. It tends to feel that way. Very cartoony. And although there's a place for that, and there are some models that I'm planning to paint in cartoon style this year, this in general, I prefer more natural. I spent my entire childhood like drawing things in a cartoony way, and I kind of got a little bit like sick of it. Like that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I'm afraid that with my mini painting, I fought back against the cartoonyism. So keep in mind that is my bias you're seeing here. There's nothing wrong with painting black to white, but it can mean in order to paint to produce that black to white, you have to really be conscious of how you're managing your mids, I think, and how you're managing your overall ratios of lights to mids to shadows, Jimbo, because it's very easy to get a white that just looks wrong when you go too dark with the shadows. Especially, like I said, white can go that dark if it's in an extremely like bright light that's casting a strong shadow. But if you're not painting the rest of the model to look that way, then it won't look right. So I am going to line this just a bit. Because even though the cloth is the same between the hood and the cape, a little of lining does help set off the fact that it is a separate piece. So it is all what you're trying to do. It's just like, be aware of what you're trying to do, right? Like, if you're going for a particular effect, then that's cool. Just make sure that you're consistently going for that effect and that you're not painting the face like it's in soft light and the white cape like it's in really harsh light. Yeah. Yes, we haven't even gotten to that yet. Hello, Kiki. Are you hanging out? I opened the door for you. You can sit in front of the cold draft while Mommy is safe in the back of the house. She's just standing there. So that got a little bit harsh. So what I can do is I can take my gray right away and blend that in. Because it's still wet. So I can essentially soften my line by making it a gentle, like more gentle shadow. And I talk about this a bit. You don't have to line a miniature painting. You can do this instead. You can essentially create like shadows that have enough drama behind them that they'll act as a line. She's in heat right now, and she's like right in the middle of it. So it's the adult brain cells went a little bit out the window because hormones, but in general, like she's backsliding a little bit. She wants to mouth a little bit more, but in general, she's a good Kiki. I have some hope now that we can actually like bring her to the seashore with us this summer, and maybe even take her to a restaurant with us at some point without her trying to climb on the table. But the next step in her training is teaching place. She just didn't have the patience for it when she was younger. You know, I thinned that way too much. Yeah, I mean, she actually doesn't really, like, the heat isn't really phasing her, except that it is making her a little bit more prone to her old habits. But I think, Cornico, that probably that is partially also that she's not getting her walks every day. We can't walk her when she's in heat. So instead she gets a couple of big play sessions in the backyard, which are good, but a different sort of exercise rate. So it doesn't necessarily give her the mental stimulation that the walk does. But yeah, otherwise she seems to be weathering the heat just fine. She's just like, why is my butt weird? Alrighty, so got a little bit darker shadow. But today's rainy anyway, although it seems to be, now it's sunny, and then it's supposed to get rainy again. Yeah, it's weird weather here in the South Bay right now. Just weird. Just weird. All right, so I need to look at the inside of this cape and decide if I'm going to keep it this white or if I'm going to make it a bit darker. We haven't really chosen like cloth colors here. I may go a little bit darker blue here, like more of a Templar blue, and go that same color with the leggings and the shirt, and go kind of wintry with her that way. Kind of feeling that. Then brown, probably brown for the boots and the gloves. We don't really have an accent color other than a blue. I could use a rusty red like her hair if I wanted to. Or an orange. I'll probably, maybe it might go with an orangey leather for some of these pouches to go with the hair. Quindy, you're funny. Yes, to be fair, you also start doing random things. That's because it's bored. They throw it in the yard and it doesn't get any interaction. Like, the only training for that is more interaction with your dog and not leaving it in the yard all day, in my opinion. It's only in my opinion. But that's usually why that happens, is the animal is really bored, and so... Especially if it already has kind of a watchdog mentality, like if it's already the kind of dog that would alert at anything strange, then it's just gonna double down on that behavior. Do they just put it out there because they're at work? Inara? Honestly, if Quindy clipped that, it'd be a little too close to home, considering I have Crohn's. Weird butt things are the norm in this household. Too much information, Anne. Too much information. Oh well, deal. Yeah, it's alone all day. Yeah, that makes sense then that it would bark. It's too bad. People think, like, there's this mistaken, like, thing that people think where they think, oh, you know, I need to leave my dog in the yard because they need to get exercise while we're gone all day, or, you know, there'll be stuff for them to like look at least in the yard. And in reality, the dog is just as bored and probably more annoying to your neighbors. Depending on the breed, of course. Depending on the breed. But, yeah. It's too bad. It's too bad that it's disruptive, and it's too bad that that you're having to deal with that. I'm just putting some shading way up underneath this helmet here. A little dark shadow. Big short-haired one. Yeah, maybe a hunting dog of some sort. Yeah. You'd have to get at the core of it, Gibson. That's a hard one. Like, there's always a way to, like, train out of that stuff, but sometimes it's just so difficult and takes so much reinforcement. Because that's the thing, right? In order to overcome that, you would have to not just reinforce it in the opposite direction, but you would have to do it every time. And very few families have the oomph or the time or the opportunity to be able to just work intensively with their animal, with their pet, in a way that does that, right? Even I sometimes, like, do not, and I try to spend a lot of time trying to train Kiki and make her into a better dog citizen of the world. Even I have a hard time finding time sometimes for things I know I should do. So, yeah, some states have laws against leaving your dog out in the yard. And some Some have laws about, specifically with, with it has to have shelter, it has to have water, stuff like that. In Texas, I think that's, or in Denton, it was a law. Maybe it's like by city. Makes sense. It would be by city. So we got some shade in there. But yeah. I always kept my dogs inside while we were at work just because, in the old place, just because it was so freaking hot for most of the year. And they were much happier indoors. And if they had to hold it for 8 hours, they could. Okay. With Kiki, I'd never leave her out in the yard because she'd dig everything. Yeah. Yeah, and depending on how long that went on, then it's really hard to turn around. Really hard to turn around. All right, so adding in that shadow there. I'm going to try the cape, the interior of the cape in white, and see if I like it as a frame for everything else. The problem with doing it white without a lot of white up here is that you can get into a problem where all your attention goes down here. So that's why I'm considering making the interior of the cape a darker color. Because, yeah, that's the problem. You could even go black with it. You could invert it completely and go white with this. There isn't a lot of, at that point you'd have to go white with the shirt as well. That would be a little better because you'd get the white up here near the face. And the face, I think, needs more highlights. Yep. Yeah, I would have been on that kid. Yeah, it's just hard. Yeah, at that point you have to remove the stimulus somehow. At that point the dog would have to be kept out of that room or something like that. But yeah, I mean, could you train it away from it? Maybe, Gibson. But it would take a better dog psychologist than me to figure out. Because the thing is, it's also how you reacted to it, right? If you were angry at the kid and upset, then your dog got reinforced, right? It's oh, my human is upset too, right? So then that makes it double bad. Yeah, I don't know if there is a way to train away from that if it's had that much time to sink in and it's been a recurring behavior ever since. I mean, my brain says there's a trigger, and maybe you could find underlying, trigger for it and maybe work with that. But again, it would take a lot of work. A lot of work. All right, I am trying to get some of that down there. I mean, there isn't really an excessively white highlight because the white is gonna like when you photo it, it has a chance to blow out, but it's just white paint. It's not the same. It doesn't blow out pixels or anything. It's just white. But yeah, you just indicate bright lighting with really dark shadows. And it has to be consistent, and there has to be, and it doesn't work great on 28. When you come down to this stuff, a lot of it is not going to work great on 28 until you get to big stuff like Rock Troll, where I did more of that, if you recall. If you're going to have really bright lighting, 28 millimeter, you're already forcing light and shadow in 28. And because it's not a very realistic scale, it has a hard time with that sort of thing. Whereas Rock Troll, I did more of the hard cutoff shadows. See that hard cutoff shadow there? And this has a hard cutoff shadow as well. So when you're doing that dramatic stuff, what you're really seeking to do is more hardcore shadows where you don't have much of a blend. It goes here from light to shadow almost immediately. Same down here. These are very hard shadows, like there. It's very cartoon, right? And that's what you do. Like, if this was white, it wouldn't like really blow out. Like you would have white where the light is falling strongest, but you'd still have some variation. But it's you're creating that illusion depending on like how the shadows are defined. But on a tiny model where you don't have all that area and mass to do it, it's just really hard to like make that look any different than your normal highlighting and shading on a 28. But yeah, so remember that blowing out, quote unquote, is a photography thing. Like it's the overexposure and the blowing out of the pixels. And when you're standing outside looking at a white thing, you see it as white. You might see it as really, really light because the white is reflecting a lot of light, right? But it's not like blowing out in the same way to your eye as it does to a camera. So yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward taking this darker. I'm thinking about it. Thinking about taking it like a blue-gray. Thinking about using carbon scoring. Because I think I'm not going to like it in this color. I feel like it's going to be not great. Yeah, I'm thinking that. All right, we're going to do it. We're going to darken it down. But yeah, sadly, a lot of the cool lighting effects that you can do, like, work much better on larger models than 28s. And you can do stuff on 28, obviously, we did in the Mouseling. But it's more difficult, and you need the right model for it. And I think the Mouseling worked well with the lighting, partially because he's more cartoon. You pretty much, with 28mm, you're simplifying everything. I mean, that's why they're meant to be game pieces rather than art pieces, right? Like a 54mm wasn't made for a game piece, with a couple of small exceptions. Nor was a 75 or 120. Those are all display level pieces for a reason, because that scale lets you do more. The 28mm is like a gaming scale that we adapted to be an art scale as we began painting better and better at this scale. But there are still limits. There are still limits that the scale imposes. So I'm using carbon scoring blue, but I'm actually mixing some brown liner into it because I want to mute it out a little bit. So I'm going to take it down into more of a wintry blue. Let me grab my base. Yeah, it's true metallics, you can tell. If I move the piece. I've just shaded it down to control the highlights and shading on my TNM, which is what I like to do, especially at this scale. Again, with 28mm, you have to control things a bit more. Otherwise, you never will see the details. So I've dimmed down my carbon scoring blue into more of a gray blue, and I'm going to use that for the interior of the cape here. I'm going to paint over it. Decided I don't want it to be try this and see if I like it better. But yeah, the problem with this is that if we put white down here, we're dragging the eye away from this. Now this still catches the eye because it's very warm, and if I keep the rest of the model very cold, then it might still work to pull the eye, but you'd still be fighting against this white, and I don't think I like it that much. So I'm going to go down and make that. And this is going to be more of a complementary color to the hair as well, so it's going to work very well as far as color harmony. You can see the carbon scoring blue has quite a good coverage to it. Yeah, I was thinking sprinklers or also Caerindra. Yeah, I mean, we do a lot more with 28s these days than people were ever quote unquote meant to, as far as what the scale was created for. But they're also bigger, right? It used to be 25 used to be the scale. True 25, which is tiny. And now I've got this dark blue wraparound here. Dark blue gray, which will give us contrast. But yeah, so there's some lighting stuff I just wouldn't do on a model this small, because I don't think it would really work very well. I'm sure somebody could do it. But I tend to like to, if there is an effect I want to do, I tend to pick the model, the scale that I think it will work on. Because if I want to do a particular effect, I don't want to have to fight the model for it. Oh no, Quindy. Yeah, I was gonna look up the UK Golden Demon stuff. I knew that David was showing me some of the entries, and they were just wowza. So, but yeah, I have to definitely look those up for Nico. Yeah, if she eats it, it'll come back up at this point, right? Poor Diva. I'm gonna put a little bit of this dark blue back in the shadow here. Now that I know what color this cloak is. There we go. And I gotta get that middle part. And then what we'll do is make this white and that white, like the sleeves and this little tabard thing. And that will continue our wintry north effect. Yeah, like that with the hair especially, it looks great. It may take 5 to 7 weeks. Yeah, that's when you get it called animal control, I'm afraid. Yeah, but it sounds like your neighbor's already peeved at you. Neighbors sometimes are trying. Yeah, Agent Marvel and me both have the same thought. So the reason not to call it animal control is not to poison your relationship with the neighbor, but from what you just said, your relationship is already poisoned with your neighbors, so I guess escalation is in the game. Lovely. Lovely. Yeah, sorry about that, Gibson. So I'm just getting a little bit of highlight there, but leaving a lot of gray underneath. Let's grab our Avocado blue. I'm going to paint this whole panel, even though the edging is going to be different color. It's just easier. Because I want to see the color composition. Sounds like really logical people. Not. Oh well. That's the trouble with neighbors. You never know who you get. We got lucky. We have two very excellent neighbors, one on each side. Both of whom have lived in their houses for many, like, decades at this point. Old school neighbors. But David and I are pretty good neighbors because we're nerds. We're inside all the time. We're never out making a ruckus. So I'm going to put a little bit. There's not much room for the sleeve over here. Just a tiny little bit. Yeah, agreed, Quindy. A dog bite is a dog bite. So just a little bit of a brightness there. And the fact that it is going to be white is actually going to help that show up, right? Because otherwise, if it was any other color, putting a tiny bit of it there would probably just make it disappear eventually. But because we're going to bring this up to white, that is going to still show up. So that's good. I don't remember if they were like terriers, like varmint dogs, or what they were bred to be. They may have been bred to be food. I have no idea. Some like urban legend is in my head saying that Chihuahuas were originally bred for a food source, but I think that was an urban legend. Seems kind of silly if you're breeding something for a food source to like make it that small. Yeah, but then you get into the whole, like, and it's hard to have sympathy for people when they're being jerks. But in reality, most people are just trying to survive, right? And if those people lost their house, who knows where they'd be? You know? Sometimes people are just trying to survive, and unfortunately, they've learned that they can't trust other people, and so they're ready to treat everybody as the enemy. And then they, you know, do things that are in their own interests, but not other people's. And they don't see the problem. It's just hard. It's a hard situation. Yeah, sounds like mental issues, Gibson. Alrighty, I'm just trying to get all of these little areas where her cloth is showing through from under the armor in the white. Yeah. I mean, you've got 11 Chihuahuas. That alone says mental health issues. $11 dogs is a lot. There we go. And sometimes you just can't reason with them. Like, it's just it. It's just, Had that situation at our last at the apartment that David and I lived at before we got the house. Yeah, I mean, sometimes with a breed, if there's not any documentation, then you just don't know why they were created. I mean, probably people thought it was really cool that they were so small. But you never know. I mean, some breeds are really well documented because the owners, the breed founder was actually keeping records and trying to do a thing like the German Shepherd breed founder. But then, Chihuahuas are probably a pretty old breed. That was probably a long time before anybody was thinking about what a breed was even. Got a little bit of a imperfection in the sculpt, so I just had to take that out, or the cast, I should say. All right, so we've got our white kind of blocked in. I need to get my shadows. I'm liking how that looks right there. I've got a little bit of white, so that's taking our eye around the piece. As we shade it and work it down a bit, and as I also bring up the highlights on her face, we're going to be able to like mitigate the distracting element of that white. Hey, Thormel. Yeah. I don't know. I just feel bad for people sometimes. Like, I wonder sometimes how people got into that place, and it's sad that people are like that. But it's also really stressful to live with that next door to that, right? So all right, so just kind of doing a little lining there on the pouch as well, just because I can. Putting in a dark shadow underneath this helmet. Now I'll line around these guys. Yeah, I would fence. I think that's probably the best way to do it, Gibson. I was going to say that will keep the Chihuahuas out. And it'll also probably be better for your peace of mind not to always be looking at their house. So just make sure it's on your side of the property line so you can do whatever you want with it and not have to consult them. I don't know what the laws are in your area, but in Texas, it was a shared fence, and to do anything in our community, like, you had to consult the neighbors. You had to get their okay. Here in California, it's the same thing. Both neighbors here have to agree to pay half if you do anything to the fence. We just had that issue pop up. So we had to like talk to our back way neighbors because we had a piece of fence that was definitely falling down, rotting out. Oh, less than 4% of modern Chihuahua DNA is of pre-Columbian origin. Interesting. Makes sense that Spanish colonial breeds would have been mixed in. Less than 4%, though. That's kind of a shame, in a way. I mean, as a dog geneticist, you like to see more than that survive. I mean, Irish wolfhounds got brought back from the brink of extinction, and they have more of their original DNA, I think, than that. I'm going to line very carefully around this little piece of white over here to try to preserve it. Luckily with white, you really don't need much. It's going to show up wherever it is. And I'm just going to do a bit of lining around here as well. Make that crisp up and look tight. Chihuahuas are just variable. Like all breeds of dogs, like I mean, come on, look at humans. Look how different human siblings can be. And human siblings are more interrelated than most breeds of dogs, you know. Happily, different individuals in a breed of dog. So you can never make a blanket statement about a breed for that same reason. Is that no matter how similar the breed genetics are, unless the breed has been bred very specifically for like one type of temperament or personality traits, set of personality traits, and even then you're going to get differences. So you can know a great chow chow and you can know a hellish chow chow. It's like, it just depends, right? I do not, I know them as in, I used to coach, the wife, and I know of them. Like, I don't know what they're up to these days. They were helping to run our game, our game stuff, right, Quindy? Our D&D session stuff. But yeah, History Prof, did you have a question about Neidhart? So see how the lining really makes that suddenly become very crisp, all these details. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, moved to California and still trying to get proper internet for their streams. Yeah, they do. And I'll tell you, it's like really hard to get good upload here. And I'm in freaking Silicon Valley. Like, if that tells you anything. But it's really, really hard. Like, it depends on where. Like in LA, I'm sure they can get high upload speeds depending on where they are. But yeah, it can be rough to try to find good upload out here. Weird as that sounds, and it depends very much on where they are too. Like in our old area here, like only now are we getting access to Fios. So we could actually get a decent upload. And again, I'm in freaking Silicon Valley. Google is 5 minutes from me. It's just ridiculous. Good, Quindy. Yeah, I figured Quindy would know something. No, I mean we've got mountains around us, but it's like, it's just the wires here are old. I mean, everything is like above ground, and the wires are old, and it's Comcast, and I'll tell you, Comcast does not have a lot of interest in upgrading there are lines like where I used to live, like my friend Katie that I lived with in Texas during my divorce, like lived just on the other side of the line from Reaper in an older neighborhood, and she had 5 upload. Like that was it. They couldn't, quote unquote, give her any better. So it's just sometimes I think in these older neighborhoods, the companies most people don't need this, is what it is, Agent Marvel. And so because most people don't need it, they get away with just not doing it and not making it available. And honestly, the worst experience I've had with this is Comcast. And I tell David, I've threatened David multiple times that the next time Comcast pisses me off, I'm going to be just pretty much calling him to tell him that I'm buying AT&T fiber optic, and he can just like call and cancel the goddamn Comcast. Yeah. Yep. Our infrastructure is very primitive compared to some other countries. Like not all, right? Obviously, but yeah, it's like they just don't want to incur the cost unless they absolutely feel they have to, and good luck with that when, and as we get more digital as a society, that will change, I'm sure. But right now, there's still a bunch of households that don't see any need for more than 5 upload, right? They're just downloading everything. Because they don't want to spend the money to put it there, Fistic. That's why. Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. And NRA has it on the nose. They want to charge you extra for business class. Yep. Indeedy, because they don't want to spend the money. Yeah. They just want to sit there in their corner and collect their monthly dues and not do anything if they can help it. Yeah. Hey, Grand Oracle. 6 months, half a subiversary. But yeah, I would love better upload. Like we have the minimum for this stream. 30 to 40 is what I usually get, and that's adequate. But I would love a dependable, like, I would love, because I upload a lot of video, right? So it's like waiting a long time. Yes. Yeah. When you've got a university, that makes a difference, right? Especially since COVID, with the students having to do a lot from home, I think that caused a bit of an uptick in higher connectivity in certain places. But yeah, it's just kind of annoying. So I'm blocking in my gray, guys. Remember to make this a little bit more. So I can take this shadow white right into gray and still have this look white, because this panel is all still going to be white. Remember that the rule is you have to have it be majority white if you want it to look white. Yeah. Yeah, Time Warner. I'm listening to Cory Doctorow's book, Choke Point Capitalism, and it's got me like looking at Time Warner with side eye big time. Some evil empires, guys, they really are evil, really, really, and Time Warner is one of them. They really are. Like the crap that they do. I just finished listening to the section on musicians and recording contracts, and I'm like, how do they even get away with that? It's like straight out robbery. It's insane. So now I'm listening to the section about streaming services and how they screw over the musicians too, because they had to have contracts with the big music publishers in order to like have what, their company, like they had to make contracts, and the big labels just essentially made those contracts to benefit them and made sure that the income was like non-attributable, so they didn't have to give it to artists. It's just bad stuff. Oh, it's so bad. It just makes me so sad for musicians. But yeah, if you want to be horrified and yet also educated, I recommend this book, Choke Point Capitalism. It's essentially how creatives and artists like really can lose at the hands of big media conglomerates and tech. And he also apparently later in the book has a plan for kind of like, hey, how we can kind of reverse this, right? This trend. So I'm looking forward to that because right now I feel sad. Oh, yeah. Ticketmaster big time. And they're terrible. Like, somehow I got on their mailing list for something. I'm not sure how. And getting them to take you off the mailing list. Like, you can unsubscribe 60 zillion times and I was still getting stuff from them. So I started spamming. I started calling them spam. They deserve it, honestly. If I tell them to unsubscribe 5 times and I make sure that I've checked every box and they still are emailing me, I'm going to call you spam, dude. You're going to get, like, blacklisted. Sorry. It's the only... I used one evil empire against the other. I used Google's powers against Ticketmaster. Hasbro will save us. Oh, dear. No. Yeah, I'm surprised that Google switched over to doing the hardware. I guess I'm not surprised because they try to... I think Google wants to be its own country. And so the more of this stuff they can control, like, the less they have to deal with outside companies for it. So I can see why they are, but I can see how they also don't have the infrastructure in place in our to really do it effectively. But I don't know. I don't know a lot about it. Honestly, yeah. So, a fistic for brush stuff, I just use, okay, so there's these great little Plano boxes, like tackle boxes, Plano, and it looks like it's a long, narrow one like this, see it? So this is my brush keeper. If I had cats or anything like that, honestly, I also have a flat sliding drawer here on my painting desk, so I probably would store them in there. But I would just put them with their tubules on. Always keep your tubules, by the way. Always keep your tubules. You keep your tubules and you put your tubules on and you put them in a nice flat box like this. If you really want to, you can take a piece of blister foam and put that over the top, and that keeps it from moving. Once the lid presses down on the blister foam, it presses down into the brushes, and their tips never get down here. You can see that there are no tips close to this end. And if they do, then you've got a tubule on it. You can see that one down underneath the sculpting tool. It has a tubule on it. Yeah. So the tubule will help protect the tip. So that's just fine. And let's face it, the box just sits down here under my desk on my caddy, and it never moves, so it's not like the tips are going to get crushed. And if it does get flipped over, if Kiki comes in and her tail knocks it over, it's not a big deal because I've got that foam on there. I've got the tubules on. The brushes are fine. Yeah, animals love the tubules, I'm sure. Yeah, a pencil case will work as well. I like the Plano boxes because they're transparent, and as you probably saw, there's marker. I Sharpied marker on there because that's what I travel with. It's a transparent box. TSA can just look at it. They can read, that it's got brushes and tools in it. Be careful, and they can open it up and see it's just brushes, but it's transparent so they can just see through it. So that's also doubles as my travel box, which is nice. Yeah, I'm with Wasser. Nobody sells the tubules separately. It is the equivalent of like stiff aquarium tubing, but aquarium tubing tends to bend. So I would honestly just get some cheap brushes and steal the tubules off them. I mean, you will go through a lot of brushes in your painting life. So just really make a note to like save your tubules. And if you have a friend who's been painting for a while and maybe has extra tubules, see if they can give you 1 or 2. Because I probably have extras at this point. Because I compulsively have been saving them for years. But yeah, that's my technique. That's what I do. I don't have cats, so on my table I just leave them out. But if I did have cats again, I would definitely use the case or a pencil case and just put them in there. No, the size one is different for all manufacturers of Fistic. Yeah, straws might work if you find narrow ones. Get the narrow ones for cocktails, because you want it thinner than a normal drinking straw. Like this is probably half the circumference of a normal drinking straw. The straws probably won't work as well especially with a narrow brush ferrule. But no, a 1 is totally different between brands and between series and brands. I have an example. Here's a 1 Winsor & Newton. Here, let me grab the other one. The other one that's going to make it look really weird. Let me see where. Do I have a. Yeah, I do. Hold on. Here are 3 different number 1s. Ta-da! So here you go, Fistic. Yes, this is the problem. It's the same problem with brands of women's clothing. Where every brand and series has a different sizing. The best you can do is honestly just ask your friends or ask on here. Now, the one thing I will say is that all of these number 1s still have great tips. So I can use them all for very similar things. But you can see the shape is vastly different. So the one on the right is a number 1 Raphael. It's an 8408, which means it's a pointed round. So it's much slimmer and pointier. Then the one in the middle is a standard series, the Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1, which I'm always using. And it's the smallest of the ones that we've got here. And then we've got the Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 1, which is much bigger and fatter than the Da Vinci. In fact, the zero Winsor & Newton Series 7 is equivalent to my Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1. You can see those next to each other. They're almost... yeah, I was never used the number 1. I like the 0. The 0 is where it's at for me, butts. But, I mean, it's got a good tip. Moderately so. I have to break it in more. I don't think so, Turgeon. I don't think so. I have a couple of different sizes, I think, but I don't... But they're not that, like... So many of them are the same, though. And, like, I think most of them I have are this 1 diameter, and it fits almost everything. Like, even the brushes that maybe it's a little short for, their little tiny tip is sticking out, but it's still going to be fine when I pack it in with foam. So, yeah, I mean, you can see here that I'm using the same size of tubule, and it's going to a different... Some of them are short, like that's a very short tubule, compared to the one next to it, which is much longer. You can see there's a slightly different diameter there. But you know what? I could swap these and they would work. So I don't find that the difference, except for the very biggest brushes where you do want this big size... But for most small brushes, I find the tubule size to be very standard, and that it doesn't make a difference. I don't sort them. I don't bother. The 3/0 is what I use for blocking in big busts. I have my 3 Raphael number 3, which is a monstrosity. Look at it. But I use this to paint almost the entire lumberjack bust for the Mark Maskelyns class. Because the tip is still really good. Like, Raphael, you can't, like, I've never had a problem with the tip on these suckers. You can see that it's just really, really good. All right, so let's continue. Yeah, not enough water, Richard. Yeah, so just steal the tubules. That'll be fine. Wasser, we do a rotation here. So every day I do a different model, and we've got a 6-model rotation. So we won't get back to her. She's not really steampunk. The goggles are actually glasses. But we'll get back to her. But we're not on her. I've got 2 more models before we loop back around to her. And we still have to do some basing on the other dude. Oh, tubules is a great word. Oh, Jolie the Scribe. She's a resculpt of an old Reaper model. Thank you, Quindy. Yeah, I don't use triple aughts. Like, honestly, like 0 is the smallest size of any brush I use. Like, I can use up to a 3. Like, Reaper, when I painted for Reaper and I used all the Reaper Kalinskis, the Aught 5 was actually my go-to. And the Aught 5 is actually more like a 00 in most other paint lines. Or brush lines, sorry. So we're just kind of like blending in some stuff here, getting this down. Bring in some white. Well, I mean, you might be able to fix it if you just use some Winsor Newton brush cleaner, Gibson. Also read the riot act to your kids and tell them that this brush is absolutely off limits and they're going to like get serious consequences if they touch it. Or hide it. That's the better option. But yeah, Winsor Newton brush cleaner in a store. My bottle got stuck in a hot car, so it is somewhat wobbly. However, that stuff is like it's biodegradable and it's non-toxic, but it's like paint thinner. It will strip paint out of your brush. So it might make it possible to save your brush. Are you doing the roll thing though with it? Have you seen me do that? I think I showed it in the brush cleaning video that I did for fundamentals, but I don't remember. Yep. Yeah, it's a great cleaner. And not too stinky. But yeah, I mean, first of all, get the globs out. But if you think it's in the ferrule, then you got to put a few drops, use a pipette, put a few drops in a palette like this. Get the brush down in it, kind of like this. Press it gently and roll back and forth. Roll back and forth in the fluid. Roll back and forth. And then take it on a paper towel and just start wiping it off, pressing very gently where the ferrule meets the thing, and you'll start seeing gook come out. And what the roll does, Gibson, is it's working the fluid up into the ferrule. And that's how you get the stuff out. Otherwise, just like dipping it isn't good enough. You've got to work it up there. But be very gentle about rolling it because you don't want to hurt it. And then wipe it off and then another go until you can't see anymore. I think it's on the YouTube. I have a brushes video on the YouTube and I think I've got the basic cleaning technique on there. Honestly, Wasser, I think the brush cleaner and restorer is if you get paint in the ferrule, the brush cleaner and restorer is the way to go. Brush soap isn't going to do it for you. Brush soap is to like keep your brushes nice and conditioned as you're using them. It's more of a more of a maintenance thing. Whereas if you have, yes, yep, Wendy. Whereas if you actually have paint globbed into the ferrule, then you're going to need the Winsor & Newton cleaner and restorer. Well, you gotta be gentle with it, Gibson. You just gotta see a little bit of distortion and then roll it gently back and forth in the fluid. If it comes apart a little bit at the tip, you're fine. Just gentle, and then wipe it off on a paper towel repeatedly. And if you don't see anything come out, like if you're doing that and you don't see any particles of paint whatsoever, it's not the ferrule, and it's maybe that your kids actually went like this. I hate to say it. They may have just broken it. Yes, keeping bug lips away from your carpet is good. But yeah, I believe I've got a video on brushes on my YouTube fundamentals videos. I think I covered cleaners. I don't know if I covered that specific technique, though I have on this stream before. The thing is that I rinse my brushes, because I use such thin paint and because I rinse my brushes compulsively and often, I almost never have to clean my brushes. My cleaners sit in their jars and do nothing. Yeah, but you know kids do it. And you gotta give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they used it and just thought that smushing it hard into the paint water was gonna make it come clean. Who knew? Who knows what goes through the minds of children? Not me. When I was a child, I preferred talking to adults. So we're gonna go gently over this, and we're leaving a little bit of texture here. Yeah, but those, you can't paint tiny details with those. I guess it depends how old your kids are. If your kids are getting into the preteen years, if it's like 9 or 10, they may get frustrated by really cheap brushes, because just like we do, because you can't hit details and you're trying to paint little miniatures. So then they may get tempted to steal your brushes. If they're like age 9 with a decent attention span, then I would get them Taklons instead. I would go to Hobby Lobby or equivalent and get some Taklons that have a decent point. Yes, they will ruin those points, but at least they can be a little bit more precise. Even when I was a kid, I thought kids were idiots. Vallejo is much thicker, it's much goopier, it's more plasticky. I mean, you can mix the two if you want to. Mixing the two is going to give your Vallejo more Reaper attributes and your Reaper more Vallejo attributes. Vallejo is known for coverage, but it's also known that you have to thin it like a demon to get it to do other techniques where you need it to be thin. That's the thing. Now, I think they've switched everything over to game color formulations, which is really plasticky, and I always hated it. I had a devil of a time getting it to go on smoothly. But it also, could be very good for wet blending. It has good coverage. They're very different lines. They're very, very, very different lines of Fistic. You'll get this when you start using them. Now, if you don't thin your paint very much, then you probably aren't going to notice much, except that the Vallejo seem to cover more and look more plasticky when they dry. It's not the same finish as the MSP. But if you do thin your paints, then you may understand there's more of a difference. It's got a different resin, Fistic. It's not just that. The chemistry is different. So Vallejo started out, it helps to know where Vallejo is coming from. Vallejo started out as an art company, but a lot of what they did was sell paints for animation studios. So when you are doing animation cells for animated film, you have to have a paint that's really high coverage. So essentially they developed a paint line that was really, really high coverage, and that crossed over really well to mini painting because a lot of mini painters wanted a high coverage paint. But the problem with high coverage paints is that the resin particle is bigger and heavier, and so when you thin it, it goes out of solution a lot faster. It'll separate, right, on the palette. You'll even see it separate in the bottle. But of course, all paints will separate a bit in the bottle if they sit for long enough. But yeah, it's not just adding an additive. You will never get Vallejo to be like Reaper because the resin is completely different. It's different. Yeah, you just gotta try it and see if you like it. I mean, that's it. Yeah, most of the Vallejo are going to be thicker, goopier, and look more plastic. They're not going to dry as matte. I mean, I always doctor my other paints that aren't Reaper. I always add Flow Improver to them. So that is one way to get closer to that. It's a different thing. It's a different beast. You will find that more paints are like Vallejo than are like MSP out in the market. MSP is more different. And, I mean, learn to use different paint lines for their strengths. Experiment. See what matches your painting style. It may be that Vallejo, like, maybe you like it. I mean... Oh, I only touched on the details. That was the very minimized, we don't take a half hour talking about paint chemistry and lecture. Mostly because I'm like close to the end of the stream and I don't want to go over by 20 minutes. But yeah, the thing to realize is that, like, although the pigments can be similar between paint lines, it's the bases that tend to be different. And the base is the resin plus silicates plus water, matting agents, surfactants, all the chemistry that makes the goo that you put the pigment and additives into the Flow Improver. And that basic goo essentially determines a lot. The Vallejo primer is not similar to the Reaper primer. The Vallejo primer is a lot. It's like Vallejo. It is a more plasticky resin still. Reaper primer is really fine. It's actually made to stick to glass. Like it's at least the Reaper white. I'd say the Reaper black might be a little closer to the Vallejo primer, but it's going to be different. Like the companies use different. Because we're pulling from different worlds. Vallejo is an art company. A lot of the resources they have are art resources. Reaper pulled a lot of its stuff from the industrial pigments realm. And so we have a different, like, we're working with different stuff, like from the ground up. Which means we don't get access to a lot of like fine arts pigments, but the pigments that we do get access to, we were able to get the high density stuff. We were able to get a very good light fastness in our pigments. Things that, and good durability in our bases, right? Things that the industrial sector prizes, but the arts sector maybe doesn't necessarily realize that you want. I always say tan skin 90-44. Tan skin can be turned into anything. Tan skin is ridiculously versatile. I kind of hope I've done a PDF on tan skin for my Patreon, and if I haven't, I need to. Yeah, there are very few primers that will adhere to glass, but Reapers will. Reaper White, the Reaper White primer in the light gray. They will actually adhere to glass. So we've got our white highlights on. So we've got our white showing up now. I kind of like this better. I like this a lot better than the cape. I like the cape with the blue now. I think that works great. I kind of wish I had more room for the blue up here. I would maybe, if the pouches weren't right next to the blue cape here, I'd consider making the pouches and belts blue, a blue leather, a dyed leather, but I don't think it would work very well. So we'll have to see what we can do. And unfortunately, it's all metal up here. So there's really no other place to put a color accent. She doesn't have a bow in her hair or anything. So I'll probably have to make the hilt blue just to repeat colors a little bit. Obviously I can put some blue on the shield, but that's a whole different beast. I can't really do the leggings in blue because they're right up next to the cape. So I can't do that. I probably have to make the leggings black. So yeah, we're very much depending at this point. The tactical consideration of making this blue means that the orange, the skin tone and the hair will stand out more. Yes. Yes, it does, Caerindra. Yeah, that was one of the things when they told me that, when the chemists from our company that we worked with told me that, I was just like, oh, perfect. And they were like, they could not believe that we were putting it on metal. And I'm like, metal's easier to stick to than glass. Why would you be amazed that this would work? It makes sense to me. Yeah, tan skin is my master skin tone, Bryce. If you add like a red brown to it, you can make it look sunburned. If you add a normal brown to it, you can darken it really nicely, down to like the lowest, like the darkest tanned Caucasian, I would say. If you add any off-white or white to it, it makes a really beautiful fair skin tone. If you add red to it, you can take it rosier. It's seriously, it's like that mid-ground skin tone where no matter what you add to it, you can make something. If you add a little bit more ochre to it, it'll go to a golden skin tone. It really is, it's the master recipe, folks. 90-44 tan skin. You can take it anywhere with just a little bit of mixing, except into the really dark skin tones. Obviously, you've got too much white, too much lighter pigments in it for that. Well, except that there's like, I mean, you could do it, but then you've got your blue-gray right up against the cape. Like, you could go with like a blue liner maybe, but then I'm losing. The thing is, Richard, dark browns really help to center a model. Like a warm dark brown, which is what I typically use for leather here, it's just a good grounding. For some reason, it has a really nice grounding feel. If I put a lot of blue gray on this, I'm going to be feeling the lack of like organic colors. Like it's weird, but for me, like the dark browns, like I can feel that they're missing. So I gotta have them. And I'm not like I don't like going too monochrome. I like to mix it up. So with the dark brown, I'm still using an orange, so it'll still relate to this. And especially if I use like an orangey color, like an orange brown, to highlight this, it'll pick up the orange tones in the skin and the hair. So even though the leather will be much darker, I'll still be pulling that warmth around the model, which is color composition. Whereas I don't know, I think I'm going to be fine with blue-gray. If I can hit the hilt here. Maybe even I could do the strap here in a leather. Or I could just put some on the back of the shield. As long as I didn't let it get too low. But the blue-gray is more like, isn't necessarily what I'm trying to pull attention to either. Remember, I want to keep my attention up here. So, yeah. Color composition. I'm going to do a color composition, like PDF for the Patreon coming up. Not this month because I already have an idea for my $2 tier and my $5 tier, but I want to do a color comp. Just because it's something I haven't talked about before, and I've started talking about it a lot more on streams lately, so that says to me I need to do a PDF on it. All right. I think we're okay. I got my white in there. I still think I'm probably going to do a silver or a gold border on this. So actually, let's block in a darker gray. Let's see what that looks like. I haven't decided how much brass or gold I'm going to have on this model yet. If I'm going to make this border that or silver. So I'll block this in gray. Although I don't think I do want it silver because I've got this chainmail here. And that's going to be silver for sure. But we'll block it in that way anyway, just to kind of like get a look at it. I think I'm to the point where I do need to start blocking in other stuff. Like I need to start getting the leather. I need to get the leather in so that I can make a color composition call. I am going to do blue on this hilt though. Just to repeat it somewhere. She'll still feel like a very wintry model. And if I want to make sure that I keep more cold tones, then what I do is I will start with walnut on the leather and I'll just bring it up just a little bit so that I keep mostly cold feel around the model. Also, I don't have a near black on the model right now except for the shadows on the armor. So making black leggings and maybe going really dark with the leather to start with would help with that. would help that with, remember how we want to use just not just mids and lights or mids, but we want to use mids, lights, and darks on our model. So now I'm missing darks, so I can make the back of the shield. What I am thinking about is making the back of the shield really dark, but then using the blue-gray to kind of bring up, like, if I make this black, I can mix the blue-gray in and suggest, like, a wood grain on the back of the shield, because the black can definitely catch some light from the sky and get a blue sheen to it. So that's likely what I'll do. But yeah, it's coming along. We still have a lot. We still have more metallics to do. I didn't do the sword at all. And that's the problem with making this gold. Like, actually, you know what? I want to take a page from you, Richard. I'm going to take a page from you. And even though it connects over there, I'm going to try this anyway. Since the back of the cape is white and the interior of it is blue, I'm just going to go and make that blue. That'll give me more of my blue color. It'll keep it from being the same as the chainmail, which is going to be tricky, considering its details very fine. So we'll repeat the blue there. And here I'll just use a shadow to take it really dark, so that, because there is a shadow here, and that shadow is enough of a separator that's not up against it. Yeah, you just have to be careful about stuff coming right up against other stuff if you're not lining or shading enough. We don't want one thing to run into the other, so that's why I didn't immediately go for the blue on the edging here. But because I have enough of a shadow here to separate the two, and here it's not anywhere near the cape, and here it's not close enough, so we're good. So that's pretty okay. And I probably should do a swatch for this model, because I haven't been doing swatches lately, and I'm like having to reconstruct stuff, so it's swatch time. Swatch time. Swatch time. Where's my mixing brush? Oh, I think most minis, like all minis that I do, I have a dark, medium, light. All Grand Oracle. Like, okay. Here's one that I'm going to be working on my personal stream next week. Let's get this white out of here. So this is a Reaper model from Pathfinder. I'm painting it for Andy Pieper. I want to get it done by ReaperCon, so I'm going to start working on it on my personal stream. But this has a definite light, mid, dark. The red is the mid. The white and the skin tones are light. The hair and the black are dark. And I'll, of course, be bringing that up. Obviously, this one, we're going to be starting to add in a dark, right? Sophie, we've got mid, light, dark. Dark on the armor, and light on the skin, and mid on the hair and the red cloth. The only time you'll find me maybe going more just two of those is when I've got a light and dark color scheme. So Goth Girl, because she's a Goth Girl, we went either light or dark. We don't really have a mid in here unless it's the silver. So, but it's yes, Quindy, I know. This is just fan service. This is Quindy service right here. But yeah, so there's not a lot of mid in this model because I was going for the gothy thing. So if I'm going for evil or gothy, that's the one exception, and I will drop the mid in that case. I will go light dark. But I will never go just mid light, and I will never go just mid dark. I think, unless actually here's an exception. Here's an exception. There's always an exception. I told you guys this at the start of the stream. We'll come full circle. If I'm working on a model which has dramatic lights and darks as far as shading and highlighting, like Troll, then you can go mid and light without a dark. So that's what we've done here, right? The purple is mid, the green is mid, the orange is mid, The loincloth bit is a little bit light. The bone is light. My highlights have gone light. You know, I've got some pure white highlights in the crystals, but there are no dark colors on the troll. But there is extremely dark shading on the troll. So that is where the dark manifests in a scheme like this. But it's always there. It has to be there. You need the contrast. Does that make sense? Like, I am always looking to make sure that I've got those darks. Somewhere I've got, you know, and it's not that you can't. This is all, you know, every rule I give you is breakable, but understand how to break it. Understand why you're breaking it. Understand what you need to do to make it work when you break it. Because whenever you try to break a rule like that, the chances are you've got to do something else. So for here, okay, you can leave a dark out of your color scheme, but then you have to put that dark in these extreme shadows so that you get the contrast you need. So even David came around to Rock Troll. Even David, like, he hated Rock Troll when I told him I was keeping him, and he's just like, green. Now he's like, you did a really good job on that model. And I'm like, yes, Rock Troll is good. Get with the program, green hater. Oh, dear. So, yeah. So that's where we are. And so we got our white figured out, and we still didn't finish our white on the back, but it's coming along, so we can see definitely. And the nice thing about putting that blue in is now we can definitely see that white, right? The blue gives us a frame of reference. It picks up the blue in the shadows, and we can see that the cape is definitely white. As we move more through everything, we'll probably do blue and white on the shield, maybe blue, white, black. I might do 2 blues and a black and a white. I don't know. I might do, who knows? Oh yeah, that was a long time ago, Zacharias, when I did Rock Troll. It was back when I was, when we were during the pandemic, for sure. So yeah, so we're coming along on her. We're getting there. Yeah, I like how she's turning out. I like all my models recently. I'm pretty happy with everybody we're working on, which is not always the case. Sometimes there's a model I'm just kind of meh on. So tomorrow is a double feature. We're going to be painting a little bit over our spell effect on Erebus, just because I want the shinies to go out and I want to be able to see all the spell effect. Yeah, the key is to keep your shadows, like, tamed. And then, of course, we've got Quindy's favorite. Yeah, the spell effect came along, like, there are still areas that are rough that I don't like very much. Like I want more of a curve or a flare up here, so I may actually use a little bit more modeling putty and bring up a couple of little spurs. But I love how this, like, arrow came out. You can see it better against the dark. That's why I need to paint it. I love how the arrow shape came out with just that. That was just using the sculpting, the water effects. And so I am really liking how this is looking. I think it definitely is a much cooler spell effect than it started out as. So we'll move forward with it. But I just want to, there's still some shiny parts. I want to paint that over. And I've decided I don't want the translucency because with the translucency comes the shiny parts. So I am going to paint the whole thing. That said, then we need to finish the basing on Quindy's lady. So that she can have a nice, like, spooky, kind of out there in the graveyard kind of base. Purple. Yeah, I mean, you can do a purple troll for sure. But then, you know, you can shade it down and highlight up. You need lights and darks no matter what. Whether you do it with your color choices or you do it with shading is largely dependent on the model and also on the scale. Although, I'll tell you, Grand Oracle, like, you could do that troll thing that I did with this guy. He's bending over. You could give him extreme shadows all under here. And you could paint him all in mids and lights except for the shadows. So this guy's simple enough you could do it. Most 28 millimeters are really going to want you to take a mid, light, dark color scheme or a light, dark color scheme instead. Because they're small, right? You usually don't have enough mass to pull off that deep shadow area, or there's so much detail you don't want to lose it in a deep shadowed area. But like Erebus here, he's one where you could paint him like the troll. You could paint him and do it all in mids with some light, and then do really deep shadows under here to bring out the drama and all these folds. So it's a very specific, I think, kind of model. And that kind of using the shading as your dark, to me, it works much better on larger models, in my opinion. But yeah, so that's who we're headed for tomorrow. Quindy, you are almost done with your little friend here. Almost done. Almost done. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. If you want a really good result, I think there's always a lot to consider. And color composition is for me, it's fairly simple to look at. Once you internalize it, once you get used to thinking about it, then it becomes very simple for you to like think about it. But getting your brain to that level where you start thinking about that, I mean, it's hard enough for a lot of people to just pick colors, right? But at the same time, color composition, like lights and darks, they should be a part of that. Like that should be a part. You don't just choose a color. Make sure that you're also choosing a light, a mid, and a dark color, right? Yep. Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for hanging out with me. We will work on these guys tomorrows. I like both of them, so I'll be happy to hang out. Happy to hang out with them. And then, yeah, then we're back to the big mouseling after that. So, indeedy. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a lovely week. I'm hoping today will be a little bit better. I feel like I have more oomph today than I did yesterday. Sure, Fistic, anytime. We are all about answering the questions. That is our job. Yeah. Yep. Okay, everybody. I will let you go. And everybody, thank you, Quindy, for herding the cats. Meow. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.